Hey guys, this is Nomiki Konst. We are here in Houston right now where the second DNC Futures Forum is taking place. We just heard an incredible speech where people rose to their feet and cheered with Reverend Barber, who, if you recall, gave a rousing speech at the DNC.
And I stopped by to say that in this moral crisis we have, it demands a political Pentecost in America. It's time to come together. And I know about the power of coming together. I know it biblically, if I can close as a preacher. I know the power of getting together because when Moses and his people and his rod got together, Pharaoh came down and the Red Sea opened up. When Esther and her uncle Mordecai came together, they were able to stop the plots of destruction against the Jewish people. When David and his rock and his slingshot and his faith came together on the battlefield, Goliath fell, and they tell me the next day the headline in the Jerusalem Morning Herald was, "The bigger they come, the harder they fall." When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got together, they turned back an egomaniac who loved to build towers and put gold on them and make people bow down to him. And when the disciples got together, they took on the greed and meanness of the Herods and Caesars in that day. I know what coming together can do biblically, but I also know what it can do historically. During slavery, it looked like justice had lost. But when Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Quakers and white abolitionists got together, they formed a fusion movement and stood against slavery. Women didn't have the right to vote, but when that sister who said, "I ain't our woman, Sojourner Truth," hooked up with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they got together and won the right to vote. Plessy versus Ferguson looked like it had the victory, but when Thurgood Marshall got white lawyers and black lawyers and Jewish lawyers and all white Supreme Court with one member who had been a part of the KKK voted unanimously to tear down separate but equal. It looked like Jim Crow had beaten down justice and couldn't rise again, but when Rosa Parks and Martin King and a gay brother named Bayard Rustin got together with Rabbi Heschel and James Reed and Viola Woosa, they tore down Jim Crow. I know it biblically. I know historically what can happen when we come together. But let me close by saying I know it personally. Several years ago, some said I'd never walk again without help. They said I might never get out of a wheelchair. I was 30 years old. I had always depended on my legs. I woke up one morning and couldn't move. I spent weeks in the hospital bed at UNC. Went through depression. For 12 years, I was in a wheelchair and on a walker. But over those 12 years, somehow my faith got together. And my mind got together. And my doctors got together. And the nurses got together, and my swim coach and my therapist got together, my church family got together, and the prayer warriors got together. And when they all got together, I can jump now, I can stand now, I can march now, I can come to Texas now.
Hi there, Young Turks. This is Nomiki Konst. We are here backstage at the DNC Forum in Houston with Reverend Barber, who... That house was on fire after your speech you just gave about coming together. How did you choose the theme tonight?
Well, when you look at history, I've been really troubled by people saying, first, we have not seen this before. We've seen it very clear before. There's always a reaction and an attempt to reclaim when black and white and brown people come together and begin to push the envelope of our political structure. But we also know that in the past, when people chose to come together, race, class, and morality together, not isolating themselves, we have seen power, and we know it biblically, we know it politically and historically. Many of us know it personally in our lives. The challenge for progressives right now is to not try to find the silver bullet, the silver answer. Well, it's just the white working class, or it's just that's actually the ploy to make us divide up into silos. What we have to get people to understand is the intersectionality of our concerns, and that in America, if you don't address morality and values, racism, discrimination, income, and economic justice, then you really do not have the kind of movement and the kind of foundations necessary for fundamental transformation. We've got to build a movement. You know, in 1973, there was an article in the New York Times where the Koch brothers basically stole Dr. King's vision from 63. Remember, 63, Dr. King said, go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama. In other words, go back to the South, build from the states up, challenge state houses. Many progressives stopped doing that. We started searching for the Messiah-type candidate. Charles Koch in '73 got with his feet and said, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to create a movement from the bottom up, and we're going to create a movement that can bless or punish candidates. And they used the Southern strategy in the South, in the Wheat Belt, in the West Belt. You know what the Southern strategy basically says? If you can find out who hates who and pit them against one another. So this is what we have. The deep question about racism and classism in this country is not David Dukes and the Klan. It is what mythology will cause or what fools people to vote against their own best interests, particularly in the South. You got 8 million more poor white people than you have black. In the 10 of the 12 poorest states are in the South. Yet we keep electing candidates, particularly congressional and at the state level, who are adverse to the very programs that would help the poor. What mythology, what wedge issues, and in the Southern strategy that's alive and well in the 21st century doesn't use overt like racism, where the N-words. Tax cuts is a code word. Entitlement reform, protecting personal rights and states' rights. And Donald Trump is not he's not the first white male to use this. He started out with birtherism. He started out with all of these racial code words. And he said things that President Obama or any black man or white, maybe even white woman, but nobody, other people could not say. He's the example of the exploitation of white privilege. You see? Yeah.
What caught me in your speech, I mean, several things caught me, but you talk about the economics. And I have covered a lot of these DNC events. I see a lot of speeches by politicians within the DNC. Even the DNC chair candidates right now are talking about reforming the DNC. There's not a lot of talk about the economics.
Well, I'm a theologically evangelical, liberal, conservative, charismatic biblicist. In other words, I'm an evangelical. Yeah. In the Bible, when you look at the scriptures, there are 4 areas that religious values, true religious values, say have to be at the center of public policy. Economics, how you treat the poor, how you treat the sick, how you treat the stranger and the immigrant, and how you treat the children and women. 5. So, in fact, true evangelicalism in the scriptures starts with a critique of poverty. In fact, it's a scripture that says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor. The word poor in the scriptures in the New Testament is patokos. It means those who have been made poor by systems of economic injustice. So a moral discussion, and that's where the so-called white evangelicals and many progressives gave cave to it. They have pushed that morality is about prayer in the school and homosexuality. Those are not even the top major issues in the scripture. The top moral issues in our deepest religious values is how you deal with poverty. How living wages is a biblical issue. There's actually a scripture that says, loose the bands of wickedness. In Hebrew, it means pay people what they deserve. I could go on and on. It's 2,000 scriptures about poverty, justice, love, mercy. There's this hate and disdain for people is not there. So what I'm saying to the party as a moral voice, not as a Democrat or Republican, as a moral voice, let's make sure that we make this a moral discussion. That's what was the genius of Lyndon Baines Johnson. And even Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when they helped make economics, health care, education, moral issues. Dr. King, it was a moral issue. Rabbi Heschel, moral issue. We walked away from that and have allowed people to take that moral language and put it in the corner when we need a moral center. We need a moral center. That's why I said, so voting rights and fighting against voter suppression is a moral issue. We ought to be screaming that right now. I think Democrats made a mistake in their primaries not to have one debate just on voting rights and connected to the denial of voting rights is not just about black people. If you deny black and brown people access to polls, then you deny the ability of black and brown and white people to form fusion coalitions. And if you deny the ability of black and brown and white people to form fusion coalitions in the South, then you can't elect progressive candidates. If you can only elect progressive candidates, you can't get living wages. You can't get labor rights. Connect the dots. And lastly, We have to talk about the economics in the South, because the South is the home of poverty, and it's also the home where people have been played against one another. So that's why we're actually doing some organizing in counties that are 89% Republican, 99% white, talking about race and class, not trying to skate around it. I think progressives are making a mistake when they say we want to find a way not to deal with race. You have to deal with it, but you have to connect it, and you have to deal with mileage. Also, lastly, when they say we want to find a way, to say we're going to Mississippi to talk to the white working class. If you don't talk to the white working class and black people together, if you don't figure ways to bring them together, if you don't talk to the white working class and show them how the same people that bring them this stuff about abortion and prayer in the school are the same people voting against them and hurting them, and help them understand that there was a time in history, in the first Reconstruction, the second Reconstruction, where black and white people came together in the South and transformed it. How in the world can we keep giving up 13 states? That's 171 electoral votes, 26 senators, 31% of the United States House of Representatives. That means you only need 99 electoral votes from the other 37 states, 25 senators from the other 37 states, and 20% from the other 37 states to control the executive branch, the legislative branch. You can't do politics like that in the 21st century. You can't do it anytime. So I'm saying we need a moral revolution of values. We must reclaim the moral center and not just build an electoral strategy, but a movement strategy.
One quick last question. We have a lot of...
Too long.
No, you're great. This is wonderful. We have a lot of younger viewers, right? A lot of millennials. You have mentioned a lot of history. If there's one speech or book that you recommend our listeners and viewers read, what would you recommend?
First of all, you have to read the letter. I can't do one. Letter from the Birmingham jail, because we are going in a season where we're probably going to have to do some civil disobedience, and people need to know how that works. It's not just going one time for a photo op and going back. When you start a civil disobedience campaign, you have to keep it going. The other piece I would have folk to read is, I hate to say it, but my piece on the third Reconstruction, because it lays out 14 lessons we've learned in the Moral Monday movement, how you bring young people together and people together, different backgrounds. It lays out this history, because if you do not know the history of the Reconstruction, then you're just totally freaked out in this moment, and this has never happened. No, this is not an anomaly in the American construct, but it also is not the only thing that happens. Every time there is this regression, there's also a mighty comeback. There's a mighty comeback. And guess who ends up leading it most time? Young people. Young people who've not given up their idealism and their moral clarity. They become a part of the energy. And they say, no, some things, as I said today, are not about left and right, but they're about what's right and wrong. So I know that we're in the birth pains. It's hard right now. It's tough right now. But we can't give too much credit to Donald Trump. Yes, he may have been selected, not elected, but we weren't unelected. The Constitution wasn't unelected. Our ability to stand up and fight back wasn't unelected. Our ability to pull people together wasn't elected. And we know that almost 3 million people were not with this. That's why we can't dismiss the voter suppression piece. And say, well, it was just white work. No, there was, long before this system was hacked by the Russians, which it was hacked by racism and fear and voter suppression. And we need black and white and brown and red and yellow to all come together and deal with that issue and say that we're not ceding any more of this democracy, no more. And guess what? In the South, it was young people, Swanner, Cheney, Goodman, black, white, Jewish, coming together that transformed the context of the nation, that then forced the politicians to have to move in another way. This is just our season. This is just our season. Others had to do it before. It's just our season now to deal with extremism. And I believe the youth of this nation, along with the elders, are ready for it. I know I am.
Thank you, Reverend Barber.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.